They thought they could push me out quietly. No severance, no drama, just make my life hell until I quit. They were wrong. I didn't just quit. I burned their whole empire to the ground, legally. Let me tell you how a law student with a photographic memory and a lawyer uncle turned workplace harassment into the most expensive lesson a hotel chain ever learned. I'd been working the night shift at the Alabaster for 3 years when everything went sideways. Not just any night shift job, this was special. See, the old owner, Marcus Blake, actually gave a shit about his employees. Weird concept in hospitality, I know. When I started as a sophomore law student, I was just another broke college kid desperate for hours that didn't conflict with classes, but Marcus saw something in me. Maybe it was the way I handled that drunk senator who showed up at 3 a.m. demanding a sweet upgrade while his wife was calling the front desk looking for him. Maybe it was how I caught the night auditor stealing from the till by cross-referencing credit card receipts with the cash register. Or maybe it was the night I talked down that pharmaceutical executive who was threatening to jump from the balcony of his 8th floor room after his insider trading conviction. Whatever the reason, Marcus called me into his office the next week. "Daniel, son, I've got a proposition for you." Marcus was old school. 70s, gray hair, hands that showed decades of actual work before he made it big. He'd built the Alabaster from a rundown motor lodge into a legitimate luxury hotel. "I need someone I can trust on nights," he said. "Someone smart, someone who can handle problems without creating bigger problems." The offer was insane. $22 an hour plus language bonuses when I translated for international guests. Flexible scheduling around my class schedule. And here's the kicker, I could essentially set my own hours as long as I covered the overnight desk Thursday through Sunday. "There's just one condition," Marcus said. "You keep your grades up. I'm not enabling someone to drop out of law school. This job exists to help you succeed, not replace your education." I signed the contract that day. Best decision I ever made. For 3 years, that job was perfect. I'd roll in at 11 p.m., handle the overnight chaos until 7 a.m., then head to class. Weekends were mine except for the hotel shifts, which gave me time to study and work on law review. Marcus treated me like family, invited me to company Christmas parties where I was the only hourly employee at a table full of executives, asked about my grades every semester. When I made Dean's List, he gave me a $500 bonus. "Daniel," he'd say, "you've got a future here, real future. Once you pass the bar, I want you handling our legal work in-house." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Marcus Blake was a man of his word. Then Marcus had his heart attack. Massive coronary at 68. He survived barely, but the doctors said no more stress. No more 12-hour days running a hotel empire. Time to retire and let the next generation take over. That's when Julian Blake entered my life like a fucking tornado. Julian Blake was everything his father wasn't. Where Marcus had worked his way up from nothing, Julian had coasted on inherited wealth. Where Marcus treated employees like human beings, Julian saw only expenses to be minimized. The first time I met Julian, I knew we had a problem. He walked into the Alabaster on a Tuesday morning like he was conquering territory. Expensive suit, designer watch, that particular brand of confidence that comes from never having to earn anything. "You must be Daniel," he said, looking me up and down like I was a piece of furniture he was deciding whether to keep. I was finishing my overnight shift, dead tired from dealing with a plumbing emergency that had flooded 3 rooms. My uniform was wrinkled, I probably smelled like industrial disinfectant, and I hadn't had coffee in 6 hours. Not exactly the image of professionalism Julian was expecting from his father's special project. "That's right, I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man." "Yeah, well, things are going to change around here." No thank you for the condolences. No acknowledgement of his father's legacy. Just a threat disguised as a statement. Julian spent his first week conducting operational assessments. Translation: finding excuses to get rid of anyone his father had been too soft on. He fired the head of housekeeping for inefficiency because she'd been letting the cleaning ladies take home leftover amenities for their own families. He eliminated the employee meal program that provided free dinner for night shift workers. He canceled the annual Christmas party and redirected the money to facility improvements that somehow included a $40,000 renovation of his new corner office. And then he turned his attention to me. Julian's campaign against me started subtly, small changes that he could always explain away if anyone asked questions. First, he eliminated the language bonuses. I'd been making an extra $2,000 to $3,000 a year translating for Japanese business travelers and German tourists. Decent money for a college student. Budget constraints, Julian explained during his first all-staff meeting. We need to streamline operations and focus on core competencies. Core competencies. Corporate speak for "I don't want to pay for anything my father thought was important." Then he started scheduling mandatory staff meetings during hours I was supposed to be off. training sessions on customer service excellence and brand representation that somehow always happened at 2 p.m. on days I had civil procedure or constitutional law. When I reminded him about my flexible scheduling agreement, he'd shrug. That was Dad's deal. I'm running things differently now. I have a contract, I said. Contracts can be renegotiated. The way he said it, cold, final, like he was explaining basic facts to a child, but Julian was smart enough not to break my contract outright. That would be wrongful termination, and I was a law student. He knew I'd know my rights, so instead he started building a case. Every minor issue became my fault. Late check-ins became evidence of my poor time management, even when guests showed up 3 hours past their estimated arrival time. Computer glitches became proof of my technical incompetence, even when the problem was obviously hardware failure. Guest complaints that had nothing to do with the front desk somehow became examples of my unprofessional attitude. Julian was methodical, I'll give him that. He spent 6 months documenting every minor mistake, every moment of imperfection that comes with any job. Meanwhile, he was cutting corners everywhere else, switching to cheaper cleaning supplies that left residue on surfaces, deferring maintenance on elevators that were starting to make concerning noises, hiring unlicensed contractors for repairs to save money. The alabaster was slowly falling apart under Julian's efficiency improvements. But I was watching, and I was documenting everything. The thing about working night shifts is that you become invisible. Security cameras record you, sure, but people forget you exist after midnight. Executives think they can have private conversations because only the night guy is around. That's how I overheard the phone call that changed everything. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday. I know the exact time because I checked the clock when Julian's voice carried from the back office. He was supposed to be at home, but his car was in the parking lot when I arrived for my shift. I was updating the guest registry when I heard him talking to someone on speakerphone. "Look, I need this guy gone," Julian said, pacing behind the reception desk while I pretended to work on inventory spreadsheets. My hands stopped typing. Every nerve in my body went on high alert. "What's the problem?" a voice asked through the speaker. Male, older, probably Julian's business consultant. "He's got this sweetheart deal from my father. Flexible hours, premium pay, language bonuses. It's setting a bad precedent with other employees. Can't you just fire him? He's a law student. Smart kid, unfortunately. If I fire him without bulletproof cause, he'll sue my ass off. And his personnel file is spotless, Dad made sure of that." My blood went cold, but I kept typing, kept my face neutral. 3 years of customer service had taught me how to hide what I was really thinking. "So create cause," the consultant said. "I'm trying, but it's taking too long. I need him to quit on his own. What about making his life miserable? Hostile work environment. Schedule him for impossible shifts, give him tasks outside his job description, document every minor mistake. That's what I've been doing for 6 months. Schedule changes, impossible deadlines, public criticism in front of other employees. But he's tougher than I thought." The consultant laughed. "Well, you're the boss. Document everything, create a paper trail showing declining performance, then fire him for cause. Just make sure you can defend it if he lawyers up. What if he reports the harassment? To who? You own the company. As long as you're not doing anything explicitly illegal, it's your word against his." That's when I knew. This wasn't about my performance or my attitude or any of the bullshit Julian had been feeding me for months. This was personal. Julian hated that his father had valued me. Hated that I had protections he couldn't easily break. Hated that some night shift nobody had more job security than he wanted me to have. But Julian made one critical mistake. He forgot I was a law student, and law students know how to gather evidence. The next morning, I drove straight to Best Buy, bought a digital recorder, extra SD cards, and upgraded my phone's cloud storage. If Julian wanted to play documentation games, I'd show him how it's really done. I started recording everything. Not our conversations, I knew the wiretapping laws in my state, but I recorded myself immediately after every interaction, documenting what was said when it happened, who witnessed it. "This is Daniel Carter, March 15th, 11:47 p.m. Julian Blake just berated me in front of 3 guests for not having their room keys ready, despite the fact that they arrived 4 hours early and I was dealing with a plumbing emergency on the 3rd floor. Witnesses present: Mrs. Henderson from room 314, the Japanese businessman in the gray suit, and Sarah from housekeeping. I printed every email, screenshot every text message. Photographed the work schedules that kept changing without notice. Most importantly, I started researching Julian himself and the hotel's operations. The alabaster had always been squeaky clean under Marcus, but Julian was cutting corners everywhere. Health department violations, fire safety infractions, building code violations, immigration law violations for the undocumented workers he was paying under the table. Julian was so focused on destroying my career that he didn't notice I was building a case against his entire operation. I created spreadsheets tracking every violation. cross-referenced maintenance records with health department requirements, documented every time Julian hired unlicensed contractors or deferred legally required inspections. By month 3 of my investigation, I had enough evidence to shut down the hotel. Julian's cost-cutting measures weren't just unethical, they were illegal. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. I needed Julian to fire me first. I needed him to think he'd won before I destroyed everything he'd inherited. The harassment escalated exactly like Julian's consultant had suggested. He assigned me to deep clean the conference rooms during my normal front desk shift, leaving the lobby unattended. When guests complained about no one being available at the front desk, he wrote me up for abandoning my post. "Daniel, you need to understand that multitasking is essential in hospitality," Julian said during the disciplinary meeting. "If you can't handle multiple responsibilities simultaneously, maybe this isn't the right position for you." He scheduled mandatory training sessions during my study time for finals. Customer service excellence in the digital age and conflict resolution in hospitality settings, corporate bullshit that could have been covered in a 10-minute memo. When I requested schedule adjustments so I could actually attend my classes, he accused me of not being committed to the team. "Daniel, I'm beginning to question whether you have the right priorities. This job requires dedication." My personal belongings started disappearing from the employee break room. Small things at first: my coffee mug, a textbook I'd left behind during a 15-minute break, then bigger items, my laptop charger, a jacket I'd worn to work during a cold snap. When I reported the thefts to Julian, he suggested I was being paranoid, and maybe I should consider whether the stress of the hospitality industry was affecting my judgment. "Daniel, maybe this job isn't the right fit for someone as easily stressed as you seem to be." Gaslighting 101. Make the victim question their own reality. But I wasn't some random employee Julian could manipulate. I was 3 years into law school with a 3.8 GPA. I knew exactly what he was doing, and I was documenting every second of it. The psychological warfare reached its peak during my last week of finals. Julian scheduled me for a double shift 16 hours straight during my constitutional law exam, the exam that determined whether I'd graduate summa cum laude or just magna cum laude, the exam worth 30% of my final grade in the most important class of my law school career. "I know it's inconvenient," Julian said with fake sympathy, "but Maria called in sick and we're short-staffed. I need someone reliable to cover." Maria wasn't sick. I'd seen her Instagram story from Cancun posting pictures of margaritas and beach volleyball 2 hours earlier. "I can't work that shift. I have a final exam." "Daniel, I understand school is important, but you have responsibilities here too. If you can't fulfill your obligations to this company, maybe we need to reconsider your employment arrangement." There it was, the ultimatum. Choose between my education and my job. "Are you firing me? I'm asking you to be a team player, to show the same commitment to this company that we've shown to you. And if I'm not," Julian smiled, cold as winter, "then we'll have to evaluate whether you're still a good fit for our organization." I looked at him for a long moment. This spoiled rich kid who'd inherited everything he had, trying to destroy what little I'd worked for. I thought about my Uncle Robert's advice. Sometimes you have to let them think they're winning before you show them how badly they've lost. "I'll work the shift," I said. Julian's smile widened. He thought he'd broken me. He had no idea what was coming. I worked the double shift, missed my constitutional law final, watched my GPA drop from 3.8 to 3.6 because Julian Blake wanted to flex his power. But I also used those 16 hours to download every piece of evidence I'd need. Email servers I still had access to, security footage showing Julian's various violations, maintenance records proving he'd ignored safety requirements, payroll records showing the under-the-table payments to undocumented workers. The beautiful thing about being the night shift supervisor is that Marcus had given me access to everything. All the systems, all the files, all the records that Julian hadn't thought to lock down because he assumed I was just the night guy. By 6 a.m., I had 3 years of violations documented on multiple USB drives. Safety code infractions, health department violations, immigration law violations, tax evasion, fraud. Julian had turned his father's clean operation into a criminal enterprise in less than 18 months. Julian showed up at 9 a.m. looking like he'd slept well, probably dreaming about finally getting rid of his father's favorite employee. "Daniel, I need to see you in my office." I knew what was coming. The termination meeting. The official end of Julian's campaign to destroy me. Sure thing. Julian's office was exactly what you'd expect. Expensive furniture bought with hotel money, framed photos of himself with politicians he'd probably never actually met, awards his father had one displayed like Julian's own achievements. On his desk, a manila folder thick with documentation. 6 months of carefully crafted performance reviews, write-ups, and incident reports designed to justify firing me. "Daniel, this is difficult for me," Julian began, pulling out a piece of paper. But I don't think this is working out. Oh, your performance has been inconsistent. You've missed mandatory meetings, failed to complete assigned tasks, shown a general lack of commitment to our standards of excellence. He slid the termination letter across the desk, effective immediately. No severance, no notice, just a kick in the teeth. I'm terminating your employment, effective immediately. I looked at the letter. Read every word carefully, nodded thoughtfully. Julian, I have to ask, did you clear this with legal? His confidence faltered for just a second. What do you mean? Well, this is a pretty clear case of constructive dismissal. You've systematically made my working conditions intolerable in order to force me to quit. When that didn't work, you're firing me using pretextual reasons that don't match my actual performance record. That's ridiculous. This is based on documented performance issues. Right, like when you wrote me up for abandoning the front desk while following your direct order to clean the conference rooms, or when you marked me down for missing mandatory training sessions that were scheduled during my classes without notice. Julian's jaw tightened. You're not a lawyer yet, Daniel. No, but my uncle is. I'll never forget the look on Julian's face when I dropped that bomb. Pure panic, quickly masked by anger. Are you threatening me? I'm stating a fact. My uncle Robert Carter is a senior partner at Morrison, Klein & Associates, employment law specialist. He's been reviewing my situation for the past 3 months. That was only half a lie. Uncle Robert knew I was having problems at work, but I hadn't shown him the evidence yet. I'd wanted to wait until Julian actually fired me to make the retaliation claim ironclad, but Julian didn't know that. Furthermore, I continued, I've documented every violation of labor law, health code, safety regulation, and federal immigration law that's occurred under your management. Did you know it's illegal to retaliate against an employee for reporting workplace violations? Julian's face was turning red. Get out. I'm going. But Julian, check your email in about an hour. You're going to have some interesting reading. I stood up, walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Julian, that recording system you had installed for security purposes, it's been recording your office conversations too. Might want to review those tapes before you talk to your lawyer. That was a complete bluff. The security system didn't record audio in the offices. But Julian went white as a sheet. What recording? Have a good day, Julian. Thanks for the learning experience. I walked out of the Alabaster for the last time as an employee, but not the last time I'd set foot in that building. Uncle Robert's law office was everything Julian's hotel pretended to be. Real success, earned through decades of hard work representing working people against corporate bullies. Robert Carter didn't inherit his success. He'd worked his way through law school, started in the public defender's office, then built his practice one wrongful termination case at a time. Danny, he said, reviewing the evidence I'd compiled over 3 months. This is a textbook case of constructive dismissal. How textbook? 6-figure settlement textbook. Maybe 7 if we can prove willful violation. I'd spent 3 years learning legal theory. Uncle Robert had spent 30 years practicing it. The difference showed in how he approached the case. We're not just going after Julian, he said, spreading my documentation across his conference table. We're going after the corporate structure. The parent company, the management company, the insurance providers, everyone with deep pockets. What about Julian personally? Uncle Robert smiled. The predator's smile that had made him legendary in employment law circles. Daniel, never go for the person when you can go for the corporation. Personal assets can be hidden in trusts and offshore accounts. Corporate assets are transparent and insured. The lawsuit filing was beautiful. 63 pages of legal precision that laid out every violation, every incident, every law Julian had broken in his campaign to destroy me. Wrongful termination, constructive dismissal, hostile work environment, retaliation for protected activity, wage theft for the language bonuses he'd eliminated, violation of my contract terms. But Uncle Robert saved the best for last, criminal conspiracy to violate federal immigration law. The under-the-table payments to undocumented workers aren't just civil violations, he explained. That's criminal conspiracy. And you have payroll records proving Julian knew about it. The lawsuit demanded damages, but also criminal prosecution. Julian's lawyers called within hours of service. My client disputes these allegations entirely. Mr. Carter was terminated for legitimate performance reasons. Your client documented his plan to create a hostile work environment in recorded conversations, Uncle Robert replied. Makes our case much easier. But the lawsuit was just the opening move. While Uncle Robert handled the legal strategy, I handled the regulatory nuclear option. Every violation I'd documented over 6 months got reported to the appropriate agency. Health department violations went to the county health inspector with photos, dates, and specific code violations. Fire safety violations went to the fire marshal with documentation of blocked exits and expired extinguisher inspections. Immigration violations went to ICE with payroll records and employment documents. Building code violations went to the city planning department with photos of unpermitted electrical work and structural modifications. Worker safety violations went to OSHA with incident reports Julian had ignored. Tax violations went to the IRS with records of unreported cash payments. I'd learned something important in law school. Bureaucrats love doing their jobs when someone hands them well-documented evidence of violations. It makes their lives easier and their conviction rates higher. The health department showed up first. Tuesday morning, 3 inspectors with clipboards and cameras. They found expired cleaning chemicals stored next to food prep areas, mouse droppings in the basement restaurant kitchen that Julian had been ignoring for months, improperly labeled containers of industrial cleaning supplies that violated toxic waste handling regulations. The restaurant was shut down immediately. The fire marshal came Wednesday. Discovered that the emergency exit in the East Wing had been blocked by furniture for 6 months to create more seating in the lobby. The sprinkler system hadn't been inspected in 3 years. Emergency lighting was non-functional on floors 4 through 8. Red tags went up on every fire code violation. Guests had to be evacuated from half the building. OSHA arrived Thursday. Found safety violations that could shut down operations immediately. Exposed electrical wiring in guest room walls, improperly stored hazardous chemicals, broken safety equipment in the maintenance areas. But the building inspector on Friday was the kill shot. Julian had been renovating guest rooms without permits for over a year. Electrical work done by unlicensed contractors. Plumbing modifications that violated city water pressure requirements. Structural changes that required engineer approval but never got it. The city condemned the entire 3rd floor and ordered an immediate structural integrity assessment of the whole building. Within 1 week, the Alabaster went from luxury hotel to regulatory nightmare. Guest reservations were canceled as news of the violations spread. Corporate contracts were terminated. The health department closure of the restaurant cost them their most profitable revenue stream. Julian was hemorrhaging money faster than he could borrow it. The local news picked up the story. Luxury hotel faces multiple violations after anonymous tips. Channel 7 ran footage of health inspectors carrying out boxes of evidence. Julian tried to blame me, of course, told reporters that a disgruntled employee was making false reports. But here's the thing about government investigators. They don't care about your sob story. They care about facts, and the facts were damning. Every violation I'd reported was documented with photos, dates, and evidence. Julian couldn't claim malicious prosecution when everything I'd reported was demonstrably true. The lawsuit was moving forward, but the regulatory violations were doing the real damage. You can fight a wrongful termination suit for years, but you can't operate a hotel that's been condemned by 3 different city departments. Uncle Robert kept me updated on Julian's increasingly desperate legal strategy. He's trying to prove you filed false reports, Uncle Robert said during one of our weekly check-ins. All the reports were accurate. I know, that's his problem. What's he offering to settle? $200,000. Wants to make this go away before the criminal investigation gets serious. My heart nearly stopped. $200,000 was more money than I'd ever imagined having. What do you think? I think we can do better. The regulatory fines alone are going to cost them more than that, and we haven't even gotten to the criminal charges yet. Uncle Robert was right. The city had issued violations totaling over $600,000. The health department fines were another $150,000. The IRS was investigating unreported income from the cash payments to undocumented workers. Julian was facing bankruptcy and potential criminal prosecution. We countered at $400,000 plus attorney fees. They accepted within 3 days. Getting fired turned out to be the best financial decision Julian ever made for me. $423,000 after attorney fees. Enough to pay off law school completely and leave plenty for a very comfortable start to my legal career. But I wasn't done with Julian Blake. See, while I was gathering evidence for my lawsuit, I'd learned some interesting things about Julian's personal life. Like how he'd been using hotel rooms for affairs with escorts every time his wife Catherine was out of town. Like how he'd been charging those affairs to the hotel's expense account as client entertainment. Like how he'd been doing cocaine in his office and storing it in the hotel safe. Like how he'd been embezzling from petty cash to fund his gambling addiction. I could have included that information in my lawsuit, could have destroyed Julian personally as well as professionally. But Uncle Robert had taught me something important. When you're winning, don't overplay your hand. So I waited. Patience is a virtue, especially when you're planning someone's complete destruction. Julian's wife, Catherine, seemed like a decent person from what I'd observed during her occasional visits to the hotel. She was always polite to staff, always treating everyone with respect, always looking slightly uncomfortable with Julian's treatment of employees. She deserved to know what kind of man she was married to. I didn't call her directly. That would have been harassment, and I'd learned enough about legal liability to avoid any missteps. Instead, I sent a simple email to her personal address, the one I'd found in Julian's contact list while gathering evidence for my lawsuit. Mrs. Blake, I recently worked at the Alabaster under your husband's management. During my employment, I became aware of some activities you might find concerning. I've attached some documentation you might find interesting. A concerned friend. The attachments included receipts for escort services charged to the hotel's expense account, security footage timestamps showing Julian bringing various women to his office after hours, and financial records showing thousands of dollars in entertainment expenses that corresponded to Catherine's business trips. I also included photos of the cocaine I'd found in the hotel safe, along with timestamps showing when Julian accessed it. I never heard back from Catherine directly, but 2 weeks later, Julian's LinkedIn status changed from married to single. 3 weeks after that, divorce papers were filed in family court. The Alabaster never recovered from the regulatory assault. Julian sold the property to a corporate chain within 4 months of my settlement, taking a massive loss because of all the violations and needed repairs. The sale price was less than half what Marcus had built the property value to. Decades of careful reputation building destroyed in less than 2 years of Julian's management. The new owners gutted the place, turned it into a budget business hotel with none of the charm or luxury Marcus had spent decades creating. Julian moved back to Europe within 6 months. Last I heard through mutual contacts in the hospitality industry, he was managing a youth hostel in Prague, quite a fall for someone who inherited a luxury hotel empire. Most of the employees found work elsewhere. The good ones, anyway, the ones who genuinely cared about hospitality and guest service, the ones who'd participated in Julian's harassment campaign, not so much. Word travels fast in the hotel industry, and nobody wants to hire bullies. As for me, I graduated law school summa cum laude, debt-free, thanks to Julian's settlement money. Started my own practice specializing in employment law and workplace harassment. Turns out there are a lot of Julian Blakes in the world. Rich kids who inherit power and use it to hurt people they see as beneath them. I make it my business to stop them. My first case after passing the bar was representing 3 former Alabaster employees who'd been illegally terminated during Julian's ownership. We settled for a combined total of $1.2 million. Julian's insurance company eventually dropped coverage for the property, citing too many claims related to management misconduct. People ask me if I feel bad about destroying Julian's life and his father's legacy. I don't. Julian destroyed his own life by choosing to be a bully, by thinking his inheritance gave him the right to torment people, by believing he was above the law and basic human decency. Marcus Blake's legacy wasn't the building or the business name. It was the way he treated people, the respect he showed employees, the standards he maintained. Julian destroyed that legacy the day he decided to make my life hell for sport. I just helped the consequences catch up with him. The real lesson isn't about revenge, though. It's about documentation, about knowing your rights, about having the patience to build a case instead of just getting mad. Julian thought he was smarter than me because he had money and connections, but intelligence isn't inherited. It's earned through education, hard work, and learning from people who came before you. Marcus Blake had taught me to document everything. Cover your ass, Danny, he used to say. In this business, your word is only as good as your paperwork. Marcus was right, and his son learned that lesson the hard way. The settlement check cleared on a Tuesday. I deposited it with a smile, thinking about Marcus and what he would have said about his son's spectacular failure. He probably would have been proud of me for standing up for myself. He definitely would have been ashamed of Julian for making it necessary. If you're being harassed at work, if someone with power is trying to push you out, if you're being gaslit and manipulated by people who think they're untouchable, document everything. Keep records, know your rights, build your case carefully. And remember, bullies count on you being too scared or too broke to fight back. They count on you accepting abuse because you need the job. Don't let them. The system isn't perfect, but it works when you know how to use it. Laws exist to protect workers for a reason. Regulators exist to enforce safety standards for a reason. Use them. Julian Blake learned what happens when you underestimate the quiet guy with a law degree and a very good memory. Trust me, it's a lesson he'll never forget. Justice never felt so expensive for him.